Welcome back, and here's our big focus story at this hour. Teens engage in unmindful sex without knowing the consequences. These are words of the Kerala High Court, which has pointed out that there can be drastic consequences under the POCSO Act, Prevention of Sexual Offence Against Children Act, which say that now, of course, this entire issue has been flagged off by the Kerala High Court, where the court says and calls for awareness in schools. The court expressed its concerns over adolescents being unaware of the consequences of having intimate relationships with each other, and even when they are consensual, under the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act, there can be a case booked under POCSO. The amended section of 376 of IPC actually calls for POCSO provisions to apply even in the case of a consensual sex if the people involved are underage. I'm going to introduce, joining me here on the program is Ansh Singh Luther, advocate, and Dr Sudha Acharya, National Progressive School Conference, Pradeep Rawat, who is a parent of a teacher. Thank you so much for joining us here on the program. This is an important issue we are discussing. It affects a lot of parents with teenage kids. What the High Court is saying is that ignorance cannot be an excuse. If there is a provision, if there is a law, that will apply irrespective. Ansh Singh Luther, what do you make of this? Do you also agree that awareness about this is very poor even among parents? Forget about the teenagers. We first need to initiate a system where the stakeholders know about this. There have been so many cases, and I will read out the data for our viewers in just a bit, of cases of consensual intimacy that turns out, and minors are booked under POCSO. Many of those cases, it turns out, were cases of romances. Mr. Luther.
Thank you for having me on our program. So what the Honorable High Court here is talking about is a very niche area where two important conditions are there. Number one, the person is of a young age. And number two, the alleged crime is a result of a relationship that went beyond platonic love. So as it stands, the law today, the statute, the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act 2012 does not distinguish between rape and sexual interactions out of affection or any biological changes. Any amendment to any statute cannot be a creation of courts. It has to go through the parliamentary process. And as it stands today, even if there was consent between two minors when they had the said sexual intercourse, it will not be a valid consent, and this will not be a defense for any accused in the court of law. Section 2D of POCSO defines child and says that anyone under the age of 18 is a child and their consent is not a valid consent. Now, one may argue that someone who is 17 years, 364 days, 23 hours and 59 minutes of age would have similar mental faculty and his consent should be treated as good as that of somebody who's 18 or more, or that when the clock strikes 12, then majority doesn't come on its own. So the reason why a benchmark is there in law is so that the law is clear, it is non-discriminatory, and benchmarks are followed so that everyone is treated equally. I'll highlight three important matters because this becomes a big contention, especially in bail cases in POCSO. I'll highlight three important cases, one of the Honorable Delhi High Court, one of the Madras High Court, and one of the Supreme Court. So the Honorable Delhi High Court in 2012 in Dharmendra Singh versus State took out a lot of considerations, which not exhaustive, but took out a lot of considerations which must be looked into while granting bail in such matters. This was a case where the accused and victim became friends over Facebook and had consensual sex, and later a case was filed by the victim. So the considerations were such as the age of the minor, the age of the accused, whether the alleged offense is involved any threat or intimidation, whether there was a tacit approval. So the word used by the Honorable High Court is tacit approval in fact, but not consent in law. So the Delhi High Court, though understood that this might be a tacit approval, but it is still not a legal or a legally valid approval.
Okay.
Though in this
That's a
case, a bail
very
was
thin
granted.
line now, Mr. Luthra. How are you
Let
going
me
to make teenagers understand this, a tacit approval and a legally valid approval? Because these are terms as adults, we get it. But, you know, oftentimes, and, you know, as a mother with growing up children, I would find it very difficult to explain to the children these nuances. And also, besides, of course, the fact is that here is a law which is in a way draconian, because even like you're saying, even in the case of a consensual situation, this will apply, which means, and again, I'll read out the figures that I was referring to. This talks about, this is a POCSO fact file, if I can refer to, where 100 POCSO cases, out of the 100 POCSO cases that a sessions court in Karnataka found from 2015 to 2016, 68% were romantic cases. Now, there is more data to indicate of how the number of cases that were found where POCSO was applied. In many cases, the one you just mentioned as well, is initially there is consent and later something goes awry, there is a fallout between the two individuals. Dr. Sudha Acharya, the question is also now about, like the court says it, and these are not my words, the court says it, that it will not help anybody to say that we didn't know the law. The law will apply indiscriminately. Are schools like the one that you are associated with, or the school conference, the National Progressive School Conference, in any way taking up these issues for the interest of the teenagers?
Oh, yes. For a long time period, we have developed a structured sex education program. Till now, or most recently, when we talk about sex education program, it is mostly menstrual hygiene, not beyond that. Even the teachers, while dealing with reproduction system, are very hesitant. There is a lot of social taboo involved with sex education. But nowadays, what we have done is peer-led sex education program, student-led. Recently, I had a debate competition about sexual identity. So children came forward so openly, and they could identify their emotion. There was free flow of emotion. They confided and they wanted to discuss. So school must provide this kind of opportunity and platform for the children also. And regarding sex education, these are programs which gives us information, attitude, values, belief, one's identity and relationships and intimacy. So you are very correct. In adolescent age, especially from classes 9 to 12, we see a lot of infatuation, in school. And in that process, out of ignorance, we have observed during lockdown period also, children sending their exposed photographs, videos, just for approval, without understanding the repercussion. Nothing can be deleted. We heard about boys' locker room, girls' locker room, even physical intimacy without knowing the repercussion. So we had a workshop on consent,
Okay.
Say no, and no means no. And all these concepts are to be given in the school. I believe that sex education should be a part of the curriculum. It should be a part of the curriculum, and right from, class 1 onwards, we have bad touch, good touch, and sensitizing them. But as they grow up, we must explain them what is a sexual health doesn't mean only physical fitness or absence of any disease, but they have to understand their body and the repercussions, and they have to identify the abuses and how to protect themselves. So even though we are aware about POCSO Act, I was just listening now, there is so much complexities in this law. Children are not aware that they can be booked under this law. So we discuss about POCSO law, we call psychiatrists, and through teacher training, continuous teacher training also in the classroom, we keep on discussing about this.
It is not enough. The kind of sex education that is happening today needs an upgrade and needs a very, an overhaul, so to speak. And it is not happening in the proportion that we would like it to happen. There are, of course, sex educators in every school, but I don't see these matters being taken up. I have personally spoken to some school principals who say, no, they do not have educating about POCSO as part of that sex education. And this is very critical. In fact, I'm just going to take our viewers through some information that we have. And since we are talking about how the filing of cases under POCSO has become a bit of a menace as well, Mumbai police chief says that in cases of molestation or sexual crimes against minors, cases under POCSO should be registered only after recommendation by a DCP rank officer. The Mumbai CP in his letter also said that in some cases of personal rivalry, complaints are motivated. NCPCR earlier objected to Mumbai Commissioner of Police's letter, saying it will infringe upon the rights of the victim. In fact, I'll also request my producer to pull out the NCPCR note to the Mumbai police. Why? This is a matter of grave concern. But, on the point of how the children, how the teenagers could react to this, could process this, I want to go across to Pradeep Rawat, who is a parent of a teenager. Mr. Rawat, if you think about it, the fact is a rape provision would apply under POCSO. If anything goes wrong, if any party complains about sexual intimacy between two teenagers, but then, for two people involved of two different genders, I'm saying, how would it anyway, how do you explain to the people involved that here is a case where even when it is consensual, it is outlawed? Do you find this difficulty in terms of making the teens understand this aspect?
I have a very specific opinion about this particular law. This law was basically made specifically for the purpose when a child or a minor is being abused by somebody who's either close to him or doesn't know him, but he's an adult. It was basically to provide any protection to a child against the sexual offenses done on him directly or indirectly. But in this particular case, as we've been discussing, if two minors who have absolutely no idea about what the law is, who have absolutely no idea what can be the consequences, who have absolutely no idea, nobody has taught them at school. Parents don't even talk about sexual things or sexual knowledge to the kids. They have absolutely no knowledge about such things, but suddenly when they grow up, there is a hormonal change. There are certain, you understand when children grow, there is exposure to the television, especially the internet, especially in the last 2 years when the classes have been going online, they have got exposure to the internet as well. So there are certain inquisitive things they want to know about. And because of that, and as previous panelist, madam mentioned, yes, there is an attraction towards another sex or a child of another sex. Then when these things happen, they have absolutely no idea they are committing a crime. So my humble submission to the people who are concerned, whether from the judiciary or from the parliamentarians, they should make a provision that when two children who are absolutely having no knowledge of this particular law, they should be considered in a different manner rather than somebody being a sexual predator to a child and abusing him or her, and then being compared similar to two children having consensual sex or physical intimacy. So what I believe is, as a parent, yes, we have a duty. As a society, we have a duty. As a school, school has a duty. But fact remains, until unless we all understand that two teenagers involving themselves into a kind of a physical intimacy, that should not be a crime until unless somebody is doing it deliberately or somebody is exploiting someone. So I believe there should be some changes. Yes.
The question is, Ansh Singh Luther, who are we trying to protect in this case? And I'm just curious to know, even if you invite a rape provision in the case of two minors, in the case of a consensual sex, who will have to bear, the charge of rape? Will it necessarily be on the boy, and why so?
So the POCSO Act is gender neutral. It will therefore depend on the facts and circumstances of each individual case. However, I agree with the panelists before me and Dr. Sudha also, who stated that awareness is important. Awareness definitely is important, and it's a right step in the right direction. However, this might not be enough. Different standard is required to deal with cases where two minors are involved in a romantic relationship which results into a sexual act. Therefore, a graded approach, in my understanding, should be the way forward. I must highlight this. Under the Juvenile Justice Act 2015, in case of heinous offences, under Section 15, a minor between 16 and 18, which is what Dr. Sudha mentioned, class 9 and class 12, can be tried as an adult, provided that a board justifies that he has the mental faculty to understand what he did. Similarly, a law where a graded approach of a lower punishment for those in this age bracket who are curious, young males and females who are indulging in this act should be there, wherein a lower penalty or a reformative approach must be taken instead of this draconian approach of applying a rape provision.
Yes. Absolutely, and all these issues are absolutely delicate, and there are certain matters where the stakeholders are the parents, the teachers, as well as the teenagers. In fact, Dr. Acharya, if you can tell us a little bit about how schools can pitch in, and the court is saying that the schools must be roped in, curriculums must have this as part of the education. But, again, I'm curious to know that if you throw a rule book at a teenager and say, listen, you can't do this because it's illegal, they may not actually want to go by the rule book. By the very nature, I find that teenagers are rebellious. The fact that it is outlawed, will it be a deterrent? And since they are not aware of the consequences, which the court is so strongly highlighting, this could become a big mess.
Yeah, you are true. So instead of coercion, I would like that creating awareness and making them aware or sensitize them that it can be an act of law and they can be booked also. That is one part. But we want complete reform. I mean, sex education should be a part of the curriculum, and how right from class 4 onwards, 1, 2, 3 is a different level, but 4 onwards, taking care of their body parts. When we are talking about health and hygiene or physical well-being as a sustainable development goal, similarly, sexuality and sex education should be one of the basic human rights. Reproductive rights is a part of human right. So we have to make clear that through continuous teacher training also, because teachers are also coming from different socio-cultural background, having different belief system. So we need to sensitize our teachers also, continuous training, so that it goes to the classroom. It should be a part of the curriculum, not that one workshop or one webinar or one somewhere skit will help. And let children be a part of it. Like I said, student-led program, peer-led education. We have an adolescent education program where they open up and they discuss about their feelings. So if we provide them opportunity, platform, they would come forward and identify their emotion, and then we can solve their problems. So if we don't provide and don't discuss, even in Indian families also, sex education is the last thing parents really sensitize their children. Similarly, in school, as I said, it is not enough. We are doing here bits of things, but not in a structured manner. So I would agree with the advocate so that it should be a structured program right into the curriculum and a part of the mainstreaming education. Then only we can create awareness and sensitize them and make them sensitize that even though it is consensual, it is not a right act under law.
Yes, absolutely. Pradeep Rawat, last word to you as the parent of a teenager. Going forward, what was the best course of action that we as parents can take?
As far as the law is concerned, there are certain drawbacks in it. As far as the what parent can do, they can obviously make them aware that if you do something like this, then that can be a criminal act. But we all know there are heinous laws. I mean, there are heinous crimes people commit, and there are heinous punishment for them as well. But what really happens? People do commit crimes. So children are basically very young to understand the repercussions of a sexual act, which they don't even know much about. So what I suggest is there should be some kind of a reprieve for the young children. They should not be treated as sexual offenders or the adults. So children should be not only given the reprieve if they are having a relationship because of a consent or they know each other. Similarly, parents have a duty to make children aware of the things, what can lead to a punishment or a crime they should not commit. And schools and society as a whole, we all need to understand that yes, certain things are prohibited, they should not be done. But my humble submission to everyone, including the panel and the people who are watching it, the important fact is make children aware what is the right touch and what is the wrong touch. That will help in going a long way. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And, this is important information and important conversation for parents to have with their children. There should be no shying away from talking about these matters, and teenagers now are like young adults. So they know things. It's just that they sometimes need direction. They need to understand that they have to abide by the law of this land. There can be some very, very difficult and unfortunate consequences to a harmless act of intimacy. That is the downside. And I want to conclude by reading this part where the Kerala High Court says that the statute does not distinguish between the conservative concept of the term rape and the sexual interactions arising out of pure affection and biological changes. It does not factor in the hormonal changes in a teenager and the kind of desires that might arise at that age. I would like to thank all my guests for joining us, Ansh Singh Luther, Dr Sudha Acharya and Pradeep Rawat. Thanks very much.